everyone, and welcome to this webinar this morning, brought to you by Landor Links and Sistra Limited. My name is Malcolm Calvert, and I'm the Director for Digital Products and Services at Sistra Limited, and it's a great pleasure and privilege for me to be chairing this session today to host a debate as we attempt to get to grips with defining AI and what AI is in transport, understanding more about where it's currently being used, and exploring where AI could be used in transport in the future. Now, I'm delighted to say that we've got a panel of 4 esteemed guests this morning. I'm sorry to say that we actually lost one earlier. Paula Clayton-Smith has unfortunately not been able to join us due to illness, but we do have 4 other panelists here today, and each of them is going to give a short presentation covering examples of AI in transport use cases and their expectations of AI in transport in the future. So that's going to be the first half of the session, and then the second half of the session will be a discussion and an opportunity to ask questions and hear those questions answered by the panelists, and we'll finish up by 12 noon. So there's lots of opportunity to ask questions, and please do that throughout the session. You will see on your screens a Q&A section. If I could ask you to put your questions into the Q&A area, that would be really helpful, because we can see them all clearly there and we can tick them off when they get answered. There will also be a chat section as well, so do feel free to use that. But again, just I encourage you, if it's a question that you want one of the panelists to answer, please put it in the Q&A area, and that would be great. We will be recording the session, so you'll be able to go back and look at it afterwards if you wish to, and any accompanying slides will also be circulated as well. Okay, so without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker today. Jørgen Petersen is the Director of Transport Technology at Sistra Limited. He's got over 30 years of experience in delivering transport technology projects across the world, including enterprise asset management, intelligent transport systems, and smart city initiatives, amongst many others. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Jørgen, who's going to be presenting the first section of this webinar.
Thank you, Malcolm. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As Malcolm said, my name is Jørgen Petersen. I'm responsible for transport technologies at Sistra. And I'm probably one of the older people on the call today. I started developing around 45 years ago, which really does show my age. In that time, there's been lots of changes. Databases have grown. When I first started professionally coding, a large database was something like 2,000 or 3,000 records. Now we measure database size not by records but by terabytes, and possibly even larger than that. In that time, though, coding's really advanced. But over the course of that time, there's been a number of buzzwords that have been buzzing around. I remember when fuzzy logic first made an appearance. Then came machine learning, and now the word of the day is AI. And I have to be honest, I don't really fully understand, despite having been in the industry for a long period of time, I don't really understand the difference. And I'm hoping that the panelists today will actually demonstrate or help me to understand what the difference really is. There is no doubt in my mind that AI is making an appearance in some areas. There are areas of excellence, certainly in natural language processing. We've seen that. I was responsible for putting the first journey planner out through interactive voice recognition. That was back in around 2003. It was right at the infancy of what could or couldn't be done with IVR. And at the time, I have to say that we learned a lot from it. But the only one word to describe it is pretty much awful. You didn't have the same capabilities you have today. And as a result, the only way of really using it, because you didn't have things like noise cancellation, the only way of using it was in a really quiet room, which is exactly where you didn't want to use it. You wanted to use it on the road and to help you on your journey. But it did teach us a lot. Other areas we see are making an appearance at the moment in a big way, particularly because they've been in the news, is generative AI, which essentially fills in gaps in data sets. And that's being used it's being abused, let's say, by the film industry, and therefore quite a lot of actors are up in arms that essentially their image is able to be used, manipulated, and essentially portray them as being somewhere where they haven't been. There's also, I've got to mention, GPT, sorry. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I wish I'd had that when I was doing my O-levels and A-levels back in the day. It would have made things far easier, particularly now, even when they can actually do some of the coding that, honestly, I think if it's not at the moment, it probably will be better than many coders out there. So I think there are areas where I can certainly see AI making an appearance, but the question is it really AI? And that really comes down to the crux of transport technologies I want to talk about. I think my concern is that we are being told that things are AI, which have been around for years and years and decades in some cases. One such case is ANPR. February this year, the London Congestion Charging celebrated its 20th year in existence. ANPR or automatic number plate recognition, was actually in existence well beyond that, or well before that. It was used in Singapore some time before that. And some are suggesting that ANPR is, or AI is ANPR, or vice versa, I should probably say. And the interest of that is it may well be. If it is, I don't fully understand it, because, as I said, it has been in existence for a long period of time. Another one is image processing. I've been involved with developing ITS cameras, a single camera front-end processing, a smart camera, so to speak, which could essentially do multiple functions, from red light running to speed enforcement to debris on road to perhaps even erratic driving behavior. All of which could be picked up by a single camera, processed at the front end, sent back images on the fractions, etc., for analysis and potentially penalties. That's been done for many years, and yet at the moment, image processing and AI seem to be synonymous, and I'm not sure I fully understand that. So where I'm coming from is I really need a definition of AI to help me move forward. But from my perspective, AI needs to be some kind of software which is self-evolving. It's adapting to the environment around it, or it's perhaps essentially even thinking for itself without the intervention of those pesky humans. And that sort of leads me on to where I think we need AI within the transport field. One of my passions, one of my areas of focus is autonomous vehicles and autonomous mobility. And certainly when you start looking at where we are with autonomous mobility and what's hindering us and moving that forward, some of those are the processing, the amount of processing information that needs to happen to make it safe, which is why a lot of the autonomous vehicles at the moment are relatively slow. If you look at some of the technologies that are in existence and being used in AVs, you're looking at lidar. You're also looking at potentially 4D radar. And the problem is lidar is notoriously imprecise when you have inclement weather. So if you have a situation where you have lots of rain, what lidar does is shoots out around 3,000 points of light every second and waits for a return. Based on the length of time it takes for that return to happen, tells you how far away an object is. Now, obviously, if it hits a raindrop and reflects immediately, what you're essentially getting is a false positive. You're saying something's in the way of that particular strobe. If it misses a raindrop and hits on the way back, you're either going to get two things happening. You're either going to get no return, or you're going to get a refracted return, which can potentially give you false information again. So there needs to be some way of sifting out the false data with the good data, particularly in times of heavy rain, snowfalls, fog potentially, and all sorts of other inclement weather situations. Likewise, if we look at autonomous vehicles one more time, some things that we do as humans is very, very easy, and we find that we don't really have to think about it. But from an autonomous vehicle point of view, they can be actually quite challenging. So as an example, complicated roadworks, which lanes are closed, which lanes are open, how to navigate those, where the exit ramp is if a partial ramp's been closed or completely closed. Those kind of things, you either need to inform the vehicle in advance through infrastructure to vehicle communication, or it needs to understand and better identify the roads that it's surrounding and be able to navigate those in a more, shall we say, autonomous way. But neither of those are actually possible right now. And that's one of the issues that we face. And then, of course, there's the data. Every new vehicle coming off the production line has 100, 120 new sensors on it. Those sensors can all disseminate information. That information has to go somewhere, and that would normally be via vehicle to infrastructure communication to an urban traffic management center, where all of this data is coming in, which is exponentially more data than they've ever had before. And the question is how to process it, what to process, when to process it, and indeed, can you really process that in such a real time as to make it useful for the road conditions around it? And I can see that being a real opportunity as we move forward, but not necessarily something which is really being actively looked at the moment. And I could be wrong about that. We've got a couple of panelists which I'm really looking forward to hearing to understand what their views of AI are and how they believe their systems can actually support the transition of future mobility. And on that note, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pass back to Malcolm. Thank you for your time, and please, any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Jürgen. Appreciate those interesting initial thoughts. Really asking that question around what makes something AI or not. And there's I suppose a few things you touched on there about being self-evolving, thinking for itself. Are we really getting to those kind of stages within transport? So lots of food for thought there. And if people have questions, please put them in the Q&A for Jürgen, or any comments indeed as well in response to what he shared. So thank you for that. The next speaker today then is Max Sugarman. Max is the Chief Executive of ITS UK. He's got a background in public relations, working in a variety of different organisations, and was the winner of the Outstanding Leader of the Year award from the Chartered Institute of Public Relations earlier this year. So it's a great pleasure to have Max with us. Before his role at ITS, he was also the head of policy and public affairs at the Catapult network. So some of you may have known him through that. So welcome, Max, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us this morning.
Thanks, Malcolm. That's great. So I've got some slides which will, I think, be appearing on the screen. There we go. As you might expect, and given my background, I wanted to kind of take a step back and look at the policy environment and where the industry is, and think a little bit about sort of what we're hearing from our membership about where AI is in transport. So next slide, please. A bit about us, for those that don't know. We're the Industry Association for Transport Technology. We've got 150 members from both the public and private sector, and we work ultimately to promote the sector and to progress it in the UK and abroad. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go sort of, as I say, take a step back and kind of look at where we are with AI as a country. And so the UK is frequently kind of quoted as being ranked third in the world across a range of measures in the level of investment, innovation and implementation of AI. I was doing some background reading in terms of what the size of the market is, and it's roughly estimated at £17 billion in the UK, but has expectations to grow to about £800 billion by 2035. And I kind of did a double take at that, given that that's a growth rate of times 50% over not many years. but that really is the size of the sector that we're looking at across all different parts of the industry, and it's a highly rapidly moving industry, as you might expect. And it's clearly been on the government's kind of watch and in the government sites for quite a while as well. If we could go ahead with click next, please. In 2018, as part of the industrial strategy, the AI sector deal was published, and that created a number of institutions and organizations. Can you please click? To things like the Office for Artificial Intelligence, the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, and the UK AI Council. And that was kind of part of the wider government's industrial strategy agenda, which included the future of mobility as a grand challenge. Some of you may remember this. And that was obviously AI clearly had a role in that. The strategy, the sector deal contained a number of recommendations, things around location data, around what the Geospatial Commission was doing, and things like that. We move on a couple of years, and can you please click? And we have the AI Council, which published a roadmap. The AI Council was kind of a cross-industry and government panel. It basically set out a roadmap for how we can progress AI across R&D, skills and diversity, data infrastructure, and public trust. And one of the things it called for was an AI strategy from government. And if you can click, please, you can see that that was the next thing that was published in September 2021, which was basically a 10-year plan for AI, and really, had a number of recommendations in from short to long term around what the government could do to improve security around AI, and kind of making data sets open and machine readable, and a whole bunch of other different elements that are in there. And we get to March 2023, and if we can click, please. And you get the next kind of regulatory review document, which published kind of a pro-innovation approach to AI regulation, it was called. And this set out kind of 5 key pillars, which the UK government see as kind of the 5 pillars for AI going forward. And those are safety, security, and robustness, appropriate transparency and explainability, fairness, accountability and governance, and contestability and redress. And the government sees those as across all sectors being kind of their key approach to AI. And they even mentioned in this document that they might put that on a statutory footing at a later point for regulators to require companies and organisations to comply with those. And then finally, in a couple of weeks, in a week or so time, if you can click, please, we've got the AI Safety Summit, which is looking at ethics and safety in AI. And I have to say that's something the UK is really kind of key and aiming to lead on, around sort of the safety side of implementing AI. And if you can click, please, I would just highlight that the strategy. This is a quote from Rishi Sunak at London Tech Week. This has got the focus at the highest levels of government. They see this as a key strategic industry for the UK, and it's something that there's going to be a lot further progress on going forward. Next slide, please. In transport, you're going to hear about many of the applications today, and I don't want to go into all of them. Jürgen's already mentioned a few. I would say that today's is about defining AI, but actually I think in some ways the more important question is how we get it into transport, how we, whether that's machine learning, kind of image recognition, generative AI. What can we do to make sure that the learnings from other industries are being taken into transport, and where also transport can lead and develop applications itself. And a couple of things that I'm sure we'll be talking about further are things like route optimization, understanding traffic density and historic and real-time traffic patterns, for things like events, and how AI can inform decisions on traffic signaling and rerouting, for example. Connect and automate autonomous mobility. There's a number of different projects as part of the cab test bed. We're seen as quite a world leader in autonomous vehicles, and the rollout that we're doing with those technologies, all of which have a strong AI element. Safety, security, enforcement, and Jürgen mentioned ANPR. Well, I think we are getting smarter and far better as well at rolling this out across kind of the safety and security and enforcement of transport. And that's things like being able to capture road users who are breaking the rules and who are doing unsafe behaviours. And also really as well around things like station overcrowding, unsafe behaviours, and things like that transport operators can use to understand better how their transport network's being used and when things are going wrong. And predictive maintenance. I mean, this is increasingly of use. We're seeing across the board different, infrastructure managers and asset managers understanding their assets better by, sensors and the use of AI, so that they don't need to get someone out to see if something needs doing on a particular piece of infrastructure. They have the data sent to them and available. And that's, obviously has clear benefits for reducing disruption and things like that. And those are a few applications. I think someone in the comment has just mentioned MAS. I think that's a really big area as well. The integration of transport and the use of mobility as a service applications. Again, as we get sort of more uniform with the data that we have, and we're getting more operators of different transport modes together, there's huge opportunities to put in AI systems to support that. Next slide, please. And I think, just looking forward, the big thing for me is where is this industry progressing? Well, what can we do as a sector to really further AI? The good news is there's some really big programs. I mentioned two here, but there's actually far more that I could have mentioned, and I think I could have done a whole presentation on all the different opportunities. But I wanted to mention Bridge AI, the Innovate UK program. That's a £100 million AI fund. And transport's one of the 4 industries in there, so there's great opportunities and for kind of applications for AI in that. And we heard with the plan for drivers a couple of weeks ago about the 70 million traffic signals fund, with 20 million dedicated for the intelligent traffic management fund, which is particularly for innovation in traffic signalling. So again, that is an area where there could be further funding for AI, and I'd suggest looking at the Transport Technology Forum's website if you want more details of that. In terms of what government is doing, we've seen the publication of Transport Data Strategy. That's really has various different recommendations about improving open access to data, and all the things that kind of are the building blocks really to extending out AI further. And we've heard, and I'm not obviously from government, so I wouldn't be able to tell you for certain. But we've heard that there's an AI strategy due early this next year for transport. We'll wait and see what that says. But really, I think the focus there will be on really making sure that we have all the necessary building blocks, building upon that data strategy, so that private organisations can go and run with different applications of AI. Next slide, please. And I think that the sector generally, we've got to be aware that there are sort of intricacies and nuances to the transport industry in comparison with others. What do we need to do to increase AI in transport? Well, I think the shift to open data is key. Standardization of data, looking at what skills and capabilities we need. I think the whole AI market, the whole sector across the UK is competing for skills and for data science skills, for coding skills that are really, it makes this even more important, that particularly for transport, that we're able to compete with that. And that's not always easy, given that transport is widely a sector that's supported by government funding and taxpayer funding. Operational expenditure and making sure we have OPEX rather than just capital expenditure to invest in some of these AI services. The right regulatory environment. I think the UK is leading on getting the regulations right and is keen not to hamper creativity and innovation from the industry. But obviously things like CAV, we can see further legislation coming for things like autonomous vehicles. And I think something that we really need to think about as well is user behavior and public perception of how we're using data. This is a kind of a really key issue that I don't think we're actually considering enough about how people feel when they have their serves, you know, that we use obviously metadata, but how they feel about how public authorities and others use their data and AI to improve their service. And that's a few of the considerations. I'm sure we'll come into all of those and discuss them. But I'm really looking forward to the discussion. And I think that's it from me.
Thanks, Max. That's really interesting, and to get that perspective, that sort of strategic perspective in the UK, and those policy aspects and regulatory aspects as well. I think it's such an important part of this conversation and debate. So I'm sure that's going to lead to a good discussion and some questions. And I see there's questions coming in the chat, which is great. So keep them coming. And thanks for that again, Max. So our next presenter this morning is Keith McCabe. Keith is the Chief Executive of Simplify with an AI at the end, Systems Limited, a company that's developed artificial intelligence-based solutions to address urban transport problems. So an ideal speaker for today. So Keith's very active in transport industry associations. He currently chairs the ITS UK Carbon Working Group, and he's involved in research and development and a member of the Artificial Intelligence and Advanced Computing Committee, amongst many other things, which I don't have time to list this morning. But we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us, Keith, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It would be remiss of me to say that I'm also the ITS UK Carbon Ambassador and try to represent the carbon agenda for the ITS industry. So if you move to the next slide, what I want to do today is really talk about our journey as a company, because I think at the conference coming up in January, there were a lot of people at different stages of developing AI techniques. And maybe if I can give a sense of where we've come from and where we're going, it might well then identify with other people's journeys as well. So our starting point was actually a European project with 40 partners across Europe, led by the University of Huddersfield, that looked into autonomic road transport systems. And by autonomic, what we meant there was the things that Jürgen was talking about, which was we were trying to identify across Europe what systems had properties of self-learning, self-awareness, the ability to self-repair, because we knew such systems were used in space quite a lot, but we wanted to understand where they're used in road transport. The good thing that came out of that was a roadmap of then how to take such techniques forward. And we were quite lucky to be the recipient of Innovate UK First of a Kind funding to actually try to deploy our technology in Manchester, working with Transport for Greater Manchester. And we did that successfully, which also led to us filing patents around the technique and the method we use for representing knowledge in traffic control. But the big step forward is when we initiated an AI research centre in Huddersfield, working with Kirklees Council and the University of Huddersfield Centre for Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. And through the previous round of traffic signal funding, started to deploy our systems across the north of England. So maybe if we move to the next slide. The area in which we work, I think, was nicely described by Jürgen, which is the area of complex traffic management, where cities have complex flows, which are made more complex with the advent of COVID and the way our travel patterns have changed, but they're being done by technology that is sometimes decades old. So the problem that we needed to face was, how do you bring in modern techniques around certain forms of AI and interface them to the existing aging infrastructure? So maybe move to the next slide. The way we approached it was to break the problem down a bit and work out what were the best techniques to address particular goals. So within the traffic signal funding, we really got under the lid of how do you make existing technology work better and how do you get more out of it, and used analytical techniques to understand faults that were laying hidden or dormant for years, and also to understand how the configurations, when they get out of date, how do they affect the way the traffic signals operate, and then put things in place to actually update that so we can get benefits straight away. But we also moved from that to understand that, well, if you can implement plans immediately and create them on the fly, what about then taking on large events or big disruptions to the network? And I think that's where we've made our biggest breakthroughs. Is if you move to the next slide. What we did is we're based in Huddersfield, which is in Kirklees, and we work closely with Kirklees Council. But the biggest event in Huddersfield this year was at the John Smith Stadium, which was a pop concert. It was Muse playing there. But the challenge that the council had was this was the first major event they'd had at the stadium on a weekday. And I know if there's people in traffic control centres around the UK will know that managing major events in the evening during the week is very different from managing them at the weekend, which is what they'd done previously. So we used our technology, our AI, if you like, to forecast what we thought the traffic flows would be on every link on the network, and set agreed goals with the council about how we keep the network moving before and after the event, and then gave them plans to implement using the existing traffic control systems, and also created contingency plans just in the case that it does get gridlocked. And I think the pictures you see there are really, one is the corridor that we were managing, and that stayed free flowing for before and after the event, and for the first time allowed taxis to drop off and pick up outside the stadium rather than half or a mile away as normally. But the other corridor, because of the timing, was actually a corridor that's configured with new technology that hasn't been fully implemented yet. So it kind of was a comparison with the old style way of doing traffic control, which unfortunately got gridlocked a number of times before and after the event. The thing that we learned from it, though, was it actually made the business case for the technology. And even just on the basis of managing events at the stadium, it pays for itself in less than a year. And it helped, I hope, in some small step to make the case for this round 2 of traffic signal funding and including a special fund for advanced traffic control techniques. Because if it can make the case, the business case, just based on managing the stadium, a lot of the other stuff we're doing mean that it's very beneficial to the network. So if you go to the next slide, really what we're then trying to do next is, back in the summer at the TTF meeting, I launched an initiative called Connecting the North, principally because we're business based in the north of England. All of our deployments are currently in the north of England, and we're part of that AI ecosystem that happens in the north. Thankfully, as part of that initiative, we've now received funding for our first major project as part of it, which we've announced the details of that in January when the project starts. But the aspiration really is to make the north of England an exemplar of the deployment of AI and use the research that we're doing to actually help it scale up quicker and engage with local authorities to speed up that deployment. But at the same time, consider what the linkages are with other things. So there's a picture of the National Health Innovation Campus that's being currently set up at Huddersfield University. We aim to be part of that, and for the first time set up an AI research lab that looks properly at the linkages between transport and health and comes up with techniques that address both at the same time. So maybe move on to my final slide, which is, when it comes to the conference in January, I think the key aspirations I have is that it would be good to have explanations of the various forms of AI. because there are different branches and sub-branches. Some are useful to transport, some aren't, and to understand how they've moved forward in the last few years and what's deployed and what not. But I think as we're discussing it, we can learn from each other, but we don't want to shy away from what are the big challenges that can be used with these techniques. So as the carbon ambassador for the industry, I really do want to see AI used to help address the issues of climate change, to reduce the emissions and reduce all the environmental impacts of transport. And I don't want it just to be something that produces more and more data centers burning more and more energy. It really needs to come up with some results. But also, as we're creating this connected world, I'm very conscious that we need to make techniques that are resilient, because the impacts of climate change now mean, as we saw in Scotland and across England in the last week, they mean that it's difficult to be connected all the time when things are flooded, when things break. And we've got to design our infrastructure so it can resist that and can be more resilient. So I think I'm pleased that it's coming to Manchester because it introduces the ecosystem in the north. But I think if we can then use it as a jumping point to then have these techniques be applied more widely, I think it will be a big step forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Many thanks for that. Good to see some of those examples of the AI that you developed in action, and also some of those questions you raised at the end about the new forms of issues are really aligning with some of the questions that are coming in through the chat. So I'm sure we'll get on to discuss those. It's also good that you mentioned the conference in January, because it, in one sense, this webinar today is hopefully a bit of an appetite wetter for the conference that's going to be held in January, and start to get you all thinking around these themes with a view to diving even deeper in that conference. So thanks for that, Keith, and look forward to hearing from you again in the discussion. Okay, so our final presenter today is Henry C. Henry is the Director of New Mobility Technologies at Connected Places Catapult, and he's also the chair of the UKRI Trustworthy Autonomous Systems Hub Strategic Advisory Network. So very experienced as a technology and innovation leader. He's got expertise in managing complex systems and has worked in safety, critical engineering, energy, and transport, amongst other things. So great to have Henry with us today, and over to you.
Hi, thank you. If we go to the next slide, thanks for the lovely introduction, Malcolm. And for those of you that doesn't know about Connected Places Catapult, just to briefly mention that we are an innovation accelerator that's supporting business and public sectors leader to access to the research and technology. And then we help to develop, implement, and commercializing these technology and innovations for existing market, and also creating new demand and grow new market in the UK and globally. As Malcolm mentioned, I also been deeply involving with some of the research the community to how to exploit this technology. But first of all, I just want to go back onto the first principle is, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? I mean, we talk about AI a lot. Is it like a buzzword, trendy word that everyone have to mention to date? If we go to the next slide, in the transport sector, it is one of the most complex ecosystem that interact with each other. That create a system challenge that we have. However, that I think everyone will agree with me that much of the innovation in transport and the way we operate the transport system has been silo, focusing on single transport mode or sectors. So this is one of the biggest problems that we are trying to solve, and even not trying to replace what we are trying to do, but it's actually how to improve are already overwhelming and complex systems together. I've done some breakdown of fundamentally that what is some of the challenge on the next slide. Some of the challenges based on what I just described is trying to optimizing the network capacity, consolidated transit route. How do we get from A to B, either people or good, much more efficiently across the network? We are increasing the capacity all the time. How the fleet management is being overwhelmed, and what considered the problem or things that can be solved is, as a human being, we are struggling to actually working with this huge amount of informations, and then would be very useful, something that can help us to actually look at the maintenance, predicting the maintenance need, minimizing the breakdown, and ensuring the reliability of the vehicle performance. Scheduling, we keep hearing like there are like the schedule like for the rail systems being planned for donkey's years, and every slightly tweak or modifications, it seems to always have some huge chaos, and then it would be very useful to have something to help us to optimize the scheduling and the route for buses and train and the public transport efficiently. I talk about silo. One of the more important things is actually how we do efficient route planning, removing those silos to enable ultimately is, as a passenger or good, I just care about how do I get to A to B in the most cost-effective and then most efficient and most clean way. And congestions, some of you have been using Waze already, is how do we optimize the traffic flow, finding the best route from A to B, rather than stuck in traffic and burning fuel, and that will help tremendously. Something also thinking about safety is if we don't realize, we already start using some of the driving aid, lane assist. When they first introduced, everyone have a big pushback. It's how we actually get the people and the technology work together, understand and appreciating how we complement each other and improve our overall transport stations. At the same time, how do we justify return on investment on our infrastructure development? A better modeling typically is human in the loop, but how we actually start using other autonomous way to able to analyzing huge amount of data to understand not just from the infrastructure development design side, but it's also what's the investment potential to aid for the cost, the carbon emissions, and the transport performance, and all of which that I mentioned, that is how it helped with the enabling the decarbonizations. Through optimization, transport route, fleet management, congestions, and overall improving efficiency and energy predictions of the generations of energy as well. A lot of other Jordan and Max and Keith all been mentioned about what is AI. I mean, on the next slide, I try to break down that next slides on here. That I think all the technology we've been just going through in the last half an hour or so has mentioned about it. It's a combination of it. I think a lot of us has been touched on each of them. Computer visions on video analytic, robotic, machine learning, natural language on ChatGPT. We're only scratching the surface of making use of it. All of it is about how to replace what we're doing or actually increase slight efficiency on stuff. But I think the power of where we are now when we talk about AI is how we're making use of all of this more efficiently. That if you think about our human, how we operate, or most of the things how we do, we observe, we analyze, decide, and act. But at the moment, we're just using this technology in isolations. It's how we actually start to use all of them together. And what we need to really think about is the way we design, how we evaluate, how we're regulating them. I need to think about the security concern that people have, and then operate the AI system in the way that benefiting people, society, and all of us to solve some of the problem that we are experiencing. I've been told to touch on some of the example that we've been working on. I mean, as a Catapult, we have been working with industry and government and other international partner in the range of application of drones, autonomous vehicles, logistic optimizations, and earlier this year we launched a manual for smart street to aid local authority to help with procurement of latest technology that may impact 10 years, 20 years time to the overall design of the transport systems. But I just want to highlight two examples that resonated people on the next slide. One of which I think everyone know quite a lot is been working on video analytic that a human can deal with the picture on the right quite easily. But if you think about that of all our busy train station as such, it will be very helpful to have video analytic to help to identify some of the unusual behavior in the systems to actually assist us as a human operator to spend less time of doing some of the tedious details job, but actually alerting us to allow us to act and then save lives or actually identify unattended bags. This is something been working quite a lot in the rail industry already, and some of the airport work that we've been doing on as well. Next slide. Another one more forward thinking in that we've been working in the maritime sectors, and a lot of energy traditionally is all at the port are provided by the grid. However, that, as you know, that with the rapid increase in energy demand for clean port in the future, it's not really quite feasible anymore to just rely on the grid, especially that it will need a lot of investment for upgrading the grid to supply all the energy for like offshore shore power to the ship. The port will effectively need to become a microgrid where energy is created, managed, stored, used, and imported. And it's not a simple thing, because when the ship are not there, the energy will not be required anymore. So it needs a lot of careful planning of the management of the energy for understanding when is it required, what's the demand from the different source, from the grid, from the shore power, future fuel, and balancing the demand with the supply. And this will be very useful in handy. Is one of the problems we are trying to address at the moment working with the port, is how we're using AI and machine learning to help to create a smart grid or microgrid that able to monitor, control, and analyze and optimizing power through the increased communication with the port access and predicting when things are coming in and out, and then actually start to generating the right demand on the power in sharing also with the local region as well. So this is another problem that I want to illustrate that is a very helpful way to understand why we need some of the AI technology today. I think I will share now, but if anyone wants any more information, we can discuss in the panel sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. And good to see that a breadth of different examples there on that case study at the end. We'll certainly explore more of that in the panel discussion. There's loads of questions coming in, which is great. Could I just remind people, if you do have specific questions, if you can put them in the Q&A section as opposed to the chat section, that would be really helpful. And maybe if you've already put it in the chat, you might want to just copy and paste something in the Q&A. That makes sure I can definitely pick it up, and we'll make sure we try and answer it. So could I actually just invite everyone, the panel, just to, you can turn your videos and your mics on and I think we'll just keep them on through the Q&A and have a discussion. I'll try and reflect some of the questions that are coming through, but panelists, if you want to, share further thoughts, please just feel free as we go to do that. So just to start, I guess we began this session, I suppose, asking the question of what is AI, and that's the title of the session today, defining AI. And we've seen some examples. I think Jürgen asked the question at the beginning of what is it really, and what makes something AI or not. I just want to read a comment from Damien Horton here, who's saying we tend to view the definition of AI as less important than clearly defining the services and their benefits, and then communicating this. So I would start there. I would start here, as there's a serious procurement issue for new technologies and businesses. So first question to the panel, I suppose, is having listened to everyone today, are we any closer to defining what AI is, and how important is that? Or is it just that there is a spectrum of technology into AI, and the key thing is we actually identify what's the most valuable thing that we can do for transport and for the industry? Jürgen, maybe I'll come to you. You've been off screen for a little while, and then others might want to chip in.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. It's actually one that's really thought-provoking as well. Should we be more interested with the definition or more interested with the service? And certainly, if the service is providing something we haven't had before, or something which is improving on something we've had before, then I think it's a very valid point. Doesn't matter whether it's machine learning, fuzzy logic, or AI. Really, I suppose it doesn't. What matters is moving the needle to the right to have more efficient transport as we move forward. My slight concern with it, though, is I think, and I don't know if this is true, my perception is that packages are being relabeled as AI because it's a great marketing tool. And I think that's where we need to be a little bit careful. But at that point, I'm going to pass over to those that know a lot more about this than I do, and ask them for their opinion.
I was wondering whether I could chip in here.
Yeah, please do.
It's just I wouldn't profess to be an expert of it myself, but I've sat on I remember I sat on the US Transport Research Board's AI committee for 6 years, and what was interesting there is the techniques used within AI have largely come from academia. And I think when you discuss with the professors who are experts in it, like we have 2 of them who are founders of our company, what you seem to understand is that a lot of the techniques have been around for a while. When Jürgen mentioned about, ANPR uses techniques that have been around for a long time, the techniques within AI have been around for a long time. And how they're applied actually is what the impacts are on society. And I think as the technology progresses, more things are now becoming possible. And our understanding of the use of the techniques and how to apply them becomes more and more over time. And I found it fascinating when we did that snapshot of autonomic systems back in, must be a decade ago now. We did find examples of it where systems were self-learning or self-adapting. You could argue that even a technique like Scoot, which is used in traffic control, is a form of self-adaptation, which was appropriate for the time. I think now if you wanted something self-adapting, you would adapt it to much wider things. And I think that's the challenge for today, is to come up with a definition that works best to move stuff forward now, rather than saying that there's going to be a fixed definition for all time. It is it's definitely a moving feast.
And I suppose there's also an aspect with that, Keith, in that a whole system might not be, the whole of a system might not be AI, but it might have an AI component in it somewhere or doing part of the process, but it's just not feasible or realistic for a whole system to be self-learning.
And a good example of that, I don't want to hog the debate. I find a good example of the one we're working with at the moment is there was a major government initiative around bus open data that published all the bus information, but it published it in a form that wasn't particularly easy to use. And we've had to use a range of AI techniques to actually then understand the data and apply it, work out where the problems are, and start to implement strategies that make buses more reliable. But I find the huge benefit of use of the AI there is you're dealing with the problems as they are. It's got movements of actual buses that you're working on, not some averaged technique. It's the real stuff every day and how it changes every day. So applying it to a problem, I think, and successfully doing that is really how you move stuff on.
Could I come in, Malcolm?
Yes, please do.
So I think it's a really interesting debate about what the definition. I do Damien's view. I do think is a good one. That talking a bit about the benefits and the kind of opportunities of what we can do. I think what's happened over the past year is really that the idea of AI has been more democratized or come into the public consciousness and awareness because of things like ChatGPT, and now more than ever you've got government talking about it, you've got the public talking about it, you've got more considerations about what it means for workforce, for cybersecurity, for a whole raft of different things, which are worthwhile discussions. I do think, though, it's an opportunity for the transport sector, and without getting into the debate of well, have we been doing this before AI was a big concept that everyone was looking at? We really should be using this opportunity to kind of go to government and to decision makers, local authorities and others, and saying, well, you're hearing a lot about AI. That this is what we can do. This is what the transport sector is doing, and what we, how we can kind of improve benefits through a whole range of the things that have been talked about here. So I would just say, I think it's actually a very exciting time. I think this kind of, what is AI definition? It's a good opportunity for the transport sector to say, actually, this is what we're doing and what we can cover.
If I could come in as well.
Yeah, Henry.
I don't think we need to hang up about the definition of AI. I mean, AI is a set of specialized and highly efficient toolbox, if I say that it's designed for specific tasks, and so it depends on which environment you are in. You will talk about use of AI tools grabbing out from the toolbox and help you to do things much more efficiently. So we talk about AI playing chess. It will win. It will only able to play chess. It won't be able to do anything else.
Yeah.
And we're human. We are here. We are here able to adapt the different environment, and we are able to decide from the toolbox what the best AI tools that will help us to do our job better. However, that evolving, that is whether AI can be a human to help to decide which tool should be using more efficiently. That's a separate debate. I don't think it's quite there yet. But at the moment, it's how I wouldn't try to debate and discuss what the AI is, what the problem we are trying to solve. And then in different environment, the whole transport sector, we have a long list of problems that currently we are unable to solve. And what we need to target on is how we make use of these very highly efficient tools to help to analyze, evaluate, and do some of the tasks much better than humans, that can be offloading our workload to go and think about some of the more important stuff that we should be worrying about.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Henry, and actually leads on to the next couple of questions I'd like to ask, which are two of the big problems that we're trying to solve in the transport industry, looking at active travel and how we encourage that, and also decarbonisation. These are two themes which are coming through on the questions. So panel, you can start to gather your thoughts on what you think about these, starting with the active travel. We've got a question from Scott Lester at Project Centre, especially interested in how AI can help with promoting active travel and encouraging modal shift. So any initial thoughts on that? And I suppose also looking at mobility as a service, that whole aspect of it. it's probably more helpful if I pick someone, isn't it, than
Yeah.
throw it open. But Jorgen, you turned your mic off, so go first, and then Keith.
Okay. I'm just trying to work out how to answer and where would be best uses. There are clearly pockets where, and I think going back to what Keith and what Henry was saying, it's a journey. Anything we do from an AI point of view is going to be a journey. So there are going to be things like best algorithms or better algorithms to define and to plan trips around. That's going to include and must include the integration of intermodal systems, which is where you combine public transport and private transport together. Because if we're going to get people out of the cars, we're going to have to enable them to get to a certain location and then move forward. Now, that doesn't necessarily answer the question relating specifically to active modes. But if you're in a mobility as a service environment where you have first mile, last mile activities and first mile, last mile opportunities, you could potentially link a car journey with a parking up a car, have a first mile or last mile activity to get them to a hub more efficiently than they otherwise would walk, and then from that point onwards take them by public transport or by DDRT type transport, which again would be another use of artificial intelligence in terms of defining how best you would define those routes for maximum people per hour utilization of a vehicle. This really comes down to more data related than algorithmic, though, in my opinion, and how you process that data more efficiently. Because again, you're looking at much wider data sets than we're currently used to working with. On that note, I'm going to be quiet, but I'd really like to hear other people's views on this as well.
But could I say a bit on that? Because I think one of the benefits of, I suppose, one of the AI techniques, which is video analytics, has made to this discussion around active travel, is it's now possible to bring the detection of pedestrians and cyclists into the mix when you're optimizing things, whereas previously it wasn't in any systematic way. I think what that's done, though, is it's created a challenge, which is that the existing techniques manage things in a particular way, largely based on measuring lumps of metal going over inductive loops. So what you've got to do is transform the way cities are managed to optimize them around the things you want to promote and the things you want to be seen to be made more reliable, which means in real time and predictively changing all of your systems, which is where you need the support of expert systems. You need the support of new techniques to do that. So I think AI has opened the door to the possibility of, if you like, managing those sustainable cities in a sustainable way. Whereas I think before, those sustainable modes weren't being detected properly and weren't in the mix. Now they're in the mix. You need the techniques to then actually start to make the decisions from a policy perspective to operationally manage them in that way, which I think we're on the cusp of being able to do that in a very systematic way, which for the carbon agenda would be a huge step forward.
Thanks, Keith. Max, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah. So, I think that integration of transport is clearly a big element here. There's been comments on about sort of how MAS can use AI and to ultimately kind of make it more accessible to take multiple modes of transport and pay through one app and that can encourage active travel, public transport use. I won't go through all the benefits of MAS and integrated transport. One thing I would say is just following up on what Jorgen said at the end. I think the kind of open data point is really, really key here. There's a lot that government is doing to open up data sets, the bus open data service mentioned, things like national parking platform, rail data marketplace. These are all initiatives that can ultimately are, as we said, building blocks of going then out for the private sector to then develop AI tools that can be used to improve transport. So it's really key that we keep with that, and things like also digitalization of traffic regulation orders. Again, that's another one which need to look at. So there's what I think is key here is more kind of what we all need to do in the background to make uptake quicker, and to kind of almost let 1,000 clouds bloom of kind of all the different applications that there could be for AI in transport.
And Max, just to pick up on that point a little bit further, if I could, that uptake, or the speed of uptake, I suppose, of the technologies that are becoming available and that can offer benefit, is a challenge. And we've, in some of the comments and questions, it's been about the challenge around procurement. There's also comment around, if we were as a local authority, almost like, where do we start? Which direction do we move in first here? And I'm also aware of, in your session, you talked about the regulation and the safety aspects and those kind of things. Where are we in terms of the sort of rate of progress here, and how do those how can those tensions kind of work out over the next while, do you think?
Yeah, it's a really important comment, because it's where transport's a bit more unique in terms of different sectors. We are a safety critical industry, or a lot of what we do is safety critical, and also we have a huge impact. There's a social element to transport about people being able to get to work. There's we've seen the recent storms and the disruption it causes, and how much misery that can mean for people. So we have to, that's why I think we're more risk averse in this industry, and that's possibly why we the agile ways of working, for example, of development for develop something as kind of in a beta mode, and then move, and then looking to kind of develop it, and sort of we can do that in transport, but only to some degree. You ultimately need people to be able to get around safely and in an efficient way, and I think that's where this comes from. I'm sure there are lots of things that you can do in procurement. I have to say I'm not a procurement expert, so but I'm sure there's lots of things that can be done to encourage that, and it shouldn't be seen as a blocker. I think transport authorities need to understand more, and particularly perhaps local authorities, what they can do without sort of working with the private sector, and that new ways of working are not necessarily risky. But I think that there is a kind of an almost a culture in transport of perhaps being more risk averse, given that the importance of the transport network. And I think that's possibly why we're maybe slightly slower than other sectors, but actually I think we're picking up pace quite quickly.
Thanks, Max. Henry, do you want to come in with your thoughts there?
Yeah, if I go for your first one about active travel, and I think it's the way how we actually need to also train up people behavior and skill. I do used to know someone that, by the way, when you get out of the Waterloo stations, that if you need to get to the Buckingham Palace, for example, it will just go straight into the tube system. People think it's the best way to do it, but with like all the technology we have now, it's actually showing you by walking over there, it's as quickly as actually than using the tube system. That's actually encourage people. After you start the time measurement, it will encourage you to do the walking, and also some of the system now showing you the carbon emission that is generating. That also another factor that by as I say, the tools we converted to able to look at other type of data for different people behavior, they will start to make their decisions more wisely in the way they choose their way on route to travel from A to B. And I think more later in the future, it would be useful actually showing your health and fitness tracking as well, which a lot of people care about, or incentivizations, and also real-time data, all of which is start a step toward to making sure you can make your choice of traveling more decisively, In regulation side, that leading on to Max about this, I think people asked the question online as well. We're in the phase of, in the transport sector, in the phase of trialing out different things, and I think it's almost we need to start moving on to is by safety, safety by design, secure by design. This also mechanism need to start introduced rather than just trialing out different technology together. It's wrong thing for capital to say, because we are trying out everything out at the moment, but almost we are in like connected autonomous vehicle side, we actually go working with the government, started looking at safety by design, how your design and testing methodology will enable it to be safe to be on the road. I mean, that's where in the military world, it's the same, that analogy that I used 10, 15 years ago. No one will imagine that we'll be using drones to do anything. But over the 15 years or so, been doing a lot of work about looking at the safety by design and secure by design. And I think that we're in the transport sector, we need to collaborate and work together as one entity to start to thinking about how we can all work together in the same standard and regulate in the same way, rather than different area or different organizations silo in designing the way of working, because almost that's only one way of doing stuff rather than getting consensus with everyone.
Yeah, and that's what you've shared there, Henry, is coming through in some of the comments as well from people around data standardization. Serene here says that working as a data analyst in the transport department, receiving various data sets on active travel, street safety, traffic efficiency, etc., and all these different formats and contexts for data, and then how to work with that, how to manage it, and have a standardized approach seems to be one of the challenges that's around. I'm in the I suppose the good position of being flooded with questions now, so I'm probably not going to get to them all, so I just want to put that out there. But this is why we need to have a conference about this, and spend more than an hour and a half and dive deeper into lots of these questions. So apologies if I don't get to your question today. Thank you for sending them in, and do keep adding your comments and thoughts as we go along. So we've talked quite a lot with the panel. One of the themes, I suppose, in the sessions has been around technology and AI within technology being able to optimize what we already have. So that's about reducing congestion or managing the assets that are there, or optimizing the network, those sort of themes. So the question I want to ask now is really what's the role of AI in decision making about the future? And this comes from a couple of sources here on the chat. One of them is Louis Williamson, who's saying, if we move beyond traffic and consider how AI can help improve and speed up decision making, for example, in decarbonizing transport and delivering more equitable multimodal mobility, is AI the right roadmap for this? Does it have a role to play? And also ties in a little bit with a question from Duncan Irons around land use strategies, minimizing transport demand to maximize sustainable modes. So thinking a little bit beyond optimizing and maintaining what we have at the moment, is there a role in helping create a vision of the future, or how we move forward more strategically? And feel free to, I'm not sure who to direct that question at, so jump in if you've got something. Keith, you've unmuted, so you go first.
So maybe there's a kind of policy way to answer that and a technical way. And maybe if I kind of try and explain the two together, is that we're probably at the point where you can start to think about what you're trying to achieve, and an authority can set goals. And the challenge that we've found over the last few years working in this area is then to turn that strategy and goals for transport authorities into actual goals for the assets they manage. because up till now, I think a lot of operational management of transport networks have been just reactive and responsive. Something goes wrong, what do I do? And it's kind of on the fly, how do I fix it? If we're at the position where we can plan ahead, put in contingency plans and predict what's going to happen, it then comes to the point where you say, well, what now do we want to achieve? How much do we want to increase walking and cycling? How reliable do we want the buses to be? How do we want to manage the car traffic and other things? And how do we want to integrate with rail? If we can start to have that, and I know we use a particular technique called planning and scheduling and goal-centered AI, where you can then put that into a language that a machine can understand, and then it can work its way to try and achieve that goal and judge that. But I think if those sort of techniques become more widespread, it's then a challenge to get the technical people to talk to the policymakers to then do that translation. I think we've been successful with the authorities we've worked with across the north of England, but I think more broadly, it's a challenge for people who work in local authorities to put down in words what they want to achieve so a machine can understand it, so they can actually work towards the same goal and work towards something we're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Keith. Anyone else want to
I'll
add
just
anything
say a
to
couple of words if I can. I think it's imperative, actually, that if we're going to develop healthy communities with more active lifestyles, heaven help me, I can certainly use it, more active lifestyles, which also feed the economic growth of a particular area, I think we can only do it by properly understanding the data around us. And I don't believe, going back to what Keith was saying, I don't believe that we as humans, because of the wealth of data that's available, can really sift through that data in a way which is manageable in a timely manner. I just feel that if we're going to start looking at pattern matching, we're going to look, which has been used to great effect in certain areas, particularly pharmaceuticals and other areas. But if we start looking at pattern matching, I don't believe that's achievable without machine learning, AI, whatever you want to call it, to really understand what the benefits are going to be if we do X, Y, or Z, or not do X, Y, and Z. I just don't see. It's like going back to the UTMC, the Urban Traffic Management Centre that I was talking about earlier. With the wealth of data coming in, even today, and this is something that Keith has echoed as well. With the wealth of data that's coming in today, we as humans are essentially guessing at a situation rather than understanding what the complex nature of that situation is and how it's going to evolve in time. With mathematical simulation and with AI associated with the data coming into it, we can have a much better understanding of what's actually going to happen, and therefore put mitigation strategies in place, not just for now, but for the predictive future, which may be 5, 10, 15, an hour hence from now. But I don't see how we can possibly think as humans we can do this with that kind of quality of data and the quantity of data, and really identifying what is right and what is wrong as well. I saw there was a question relating to how do we identify whether a sensor is not working. Well, that's been a classic problem all the way through my transport career, and again through AI and through machine learning, through data matching, data sifting, I think that is achievable. I think that's even achievable now. The problem is we don't necessarily have the systems that are able to do that, but it is achievable.
Thanks, Jürgen. Max, do you want to jump in on
that?
I
mean, I don't have much to add because I think both Keith and Jürgen have kind of said that. I think, it's quite an exciting opportunity as from what both have just said about, how we can ultimately, the expansion of the ability to make quality decisions about transport based on a whole range of sort of the capacity it opens up, and also the information that it provides with for transport planners, transport operators, everyone. It's really quite exciting. The one thing I would say is, it's always important that we're again also considering the biases that we might put in. There's been a lot of done on this about sort of making sure that the AI products and services we build don't reflect biases that maybe the people who've created them have, and I think that's going to be a really important element in terms of decision making, because I think ultimately there's we've seen things go wrong where AI has taken a whole sample of data and come up with decision X where it should be decision Y, and that needs a human element in it. We need to consider that in transport, because there's a whole raft of different areas where that could go wrong. But I think increasingly it sounds like a lot of people in the sector are doing that. So yeah, that's a positive.
Thanks, Max. Henry, any thoughts before we move to the last couple of questions?
Very quickly, that as I said earlier, is a toolbox, and depends how we optimize it. And I think one of the things we never really thought about it, even in this conversation so far, we talk about transport sector. But I think one of the power of it is actually consideration of how other places have applied already. And when we talk about transport, it's not just necessarily about optimizations, obviously, but also how we currently use our transport and the investment on transport. I mean, if you look at the rail system, for example, it has capacity, but it's making a loss. It's almost, can we actually configure AI, started looking at what the model of investments versus utilizations of it, and how the investment should be able to divert it to making sure the rail system is still sustainable, and also encourage people how it should be traveling, where they need travel at all, and still maintain. I think you just need to think about the questions need to be much broader than our current problems questions. It's almost, look, AI have the power of analyze stuff much more efficient than human can do. So we should be stretching the question of some of the questions that we can't actually relate before. So I'm just thinking we need to broaden our questions sometimes for AI to allow us to make more conscious decisions with the summarize of data. And secondly, also, there's a lot of places of data go wrong, but it's more important also, we need to start able to challenge, is the research community be doing a lot of AI development and such, is the explainability of AI, rather than this is the answer. It's like when you recruit someone new, you always start to interrogate them. But it seems to AI, we don't do the same thing. So we then start saying it's wrong, but same as a human, we allow it to go wrong, but it's about the explainability of it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's really interesting thinking about that, the asking more general questions, like you said, or broader questions, because I've always thought that's one of the interesting things about the industry that we work in, the sector we work in. It just touches on such a breadth of life, of society and what goes on, but often we're looking at very specific things within a transport context, and even down into more detail by mode or by particular sector, and maybe that's one of the things that AI can offer is actually asking some of these bigger questions that touch on other areas of life, like health and climate and the economy and how we use land and so on, and drawing out more understanding of that, I guess, and how transport fits in. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, excuse me. So I want to make sure I just capture if anyone on the panel wants to add any final thoughts on, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. Thank you. Any final thoughts before we close? I do just want to really invite that, so that make sure you've all had an opportunity to share what you want to today. Gets a couple of questions on my mind, which are maybe a little bit more out of the box, or what's possible, where could this all go? Where could we be in 10, 15, 20 years? What could we imagine with AI being underpinning more of what we do in our industry? And also, what could go wrong? What should we be really cautious of and aware of that might we need to just be careful about and manage those steps. So I'll offer up those two questions, but please take the last 5 minutes. Just we'll go around everyone in turn and just any final thoughts as we wrap up the session today. So we'll go in the order of the presentations, Jürgen, and then Max, Keith, and Henry.
Yeah, thank you for that. No real final thoughts, although I did think that your question was a good one in terms of what could possibly go wrong. And I think there's obviously the doomsday scenario, which I'm not even going to entertain because I just think that is ridiculous. But I think my biggest concern is cybersecurity and the ability for these systems to be hacked and abused. I'm certainly working with a couple of airports at the moment, and it's certainly on their radar in a big way, particularly when it comes to autonomous vehicles and how those could potentially be used as weapons. So I think from my point where it could go, I think the sky's the limit, honestly. If you look at what's happened in the last 40 odd years and where we've gone in those 40 years, it's staggering. And you really probably wouldn't write a book in it and people wouldn't believe you if that were the case. But on that note, I'm going to stop because I think I need to give the other panelists the time to respond as well. But thank you for the opportunity today.
Yeah, if I come in there. So the opportunity, I think, there's a massive opportunity for the sector. I think, transport for a long time has been interventions around physical infrastructure, and I think that will change is changing already. And there's a massive opportunity for things like AI and for all the benefits that have been listed here by the speakers today in terms of traffic management, integration of transport. The applications are almost endless. Risks are, I think, cybersecurity is obviously a key one. There is also, I think, a real issue around increasing focus and public perception on how we use technology in this industry. I'll just point to the smart motorways decision in April, which were cancelled, mostly because of public perception and backlash about the perception of safety. And there was a lot of good reasons to believe that the safety was improved on smart motorways for a number of different factors, but the public, from training or for awareness and sort of understanding of what they needed to do if they were to break down on a smart motorway, felt unsafe on that, and therefore we're at the decision where the rollout has been stopped. I think without going again to doomsday scenarios, that scrutiny is going to be across all levels of transport technology, and we need to be prepared for that. It means we need to be thinking things like human factors and the kind of user behavior side of this. We also need to probably get a bit better at communication as well as to why we're doing things and how we're doing it, and how the public should engage with that. So that's kind of an element I think is worth thinking about in terms of the AI perspective too.
Thanks, Max, sorry. And Keith, your final thoughts.
One thing I'm quite looking forward to is when we start to join, say, transport and health together. It might help us get away from what can quite often happen in the transport sector, is a fairly siloed thinking towards trying to solve a problem. Because I know one of my co-founders of the company, James Blackwood, during COVID actually was seconded into the Scottish Health Service to manage the NHS's AI programme to come up with new techniques using AI in health. And they come up with a way of spotting how severe COVID would be from image processing of X-rays. So you can see that spurs on in investment in health and AI, and we can learn a lot from the way they deployed and developed techniques. But I think also when we get out the silo, we can then, I happened to be in a really fascinating meeting about 6-9 months ago, where we brought together the health service and the transport people in a large city in the north. I won't name them because it might be embarrassing, but we brought them together and we asked the question to the health people, what's your busiest day in hospitals? And they said it's a Wednesday. And then we asked the transport people, what's the busiest day on the road network? They said a Wednesday. And what causes the most disruption to appointments? It's delays on the transport network of people getting to hospital. So in some sense, why are you organising the most activities on a Wednesday? And it's like, it's never been considered. And you think transport has one of the biggest effects on health in the UK through emissions, and it comes through emissions on air quality due to congestion. But the health service, the biggest generator of traffic in the UK, the largest employer, is it considering what impacts it might have on emissions? And should we be using some of these AI techniques to kind of make it clear and explicit what the links are and try to influence both organisations, not just sticking within our silo? Because I think if we start to understand the problems as a whole and have the AI analyse it so we can present them in a way that people can understand, we've then got more chance of moving it forward, not just as a transport sector, but as, you know, the whole economy and living up to the thing that Max said, trying to punch above our weight as a country as the third biggest investor in AI. Well, let's make sure we deliver on that.
Thanks, Keith. Really interesting final thoughts there. And Henry, just in the last sort of minute or so.
Yep, it's a quick one. That I think the big, if I'm starting to say about the success, is like in 10 years' time that we're not talking about AI, because it will just become the norms of our day-to-day, integrated into our day-to-day activities. And so no one will actually talk about the success of AI because it's just become the norm. The only problem is if we still talk about AI, then there's a problem. As I said, there are a lot of AI as a tools. I can't stress it enough. If people actually don't really know about AI, I would encourage them to start to engage like with what I associate with like the task hub, to actually looking at the technology of the research of ideas. Then in the middle is like the company actually providing different AI tools that you should analyze. And thirdly, is more important, is thinking about your problems. And I think that by preparing what your challenge and problems are, going to the Transport AI event happening next year, that will help you to have very useful conversation with the people with the AI tools, people who have been applying different places, and you can actually exploit and get the benefit out from the event much better.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to all the panelists today, Jürgen, Max, Keith, and Henry. Really appreciate your contributions. We're sorry that Paula Clayton-Smith wasn't able to join us today, but hopefully she will at the conference. And hopefully that whets your appetite for an ongoing conversation that will be happening at the conference, and no doubt well beyond that. Lots of questions raised today, lots of ideas and thoughts, which I think it's been really interesting to listen to and stimulating. I hope you've appreciated it. The recording and the slides will be available, so you'll get an email about that. And thanks again for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.